How's it going, my bakers? Hope you're having a lovely day. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're making a unique Jewish bread. So let's go to the kitchen, check it out. Matzah is a traditional Jewish flatbread. It's kind of like a cracker. In its simplest form, it's made with only water and flour. It is an important part of the Passover celebrations around Easter time, but you can eat it any time of year. This version contains a little bit of olive oil and salt. It is very thin, crispy and tasty, and it makes for the perfect snack. My favorite is a little bit of cream cheese, salmon, capers and red onions. But you could just eat them as they are, or dip them in some hummus perhaps. But let's just see what we need to make them. We need some white bread flour, water, salt, olive oil, and some more salt to sprinkle on top before baking for that extra salty crunch, but that's optional. As for the equipment, we'll need a couple of trays lined with some non-stick paper, a bowl, scales, a dough scraper, a brush, a fork, and a rolling pin. We'll also need something to cut the dough with. A pizza cutter is the perfect tool for this. If you don't have one, you can use a knife. Just make sure to not mess up your table. Instead of cutting in a sawing motion, just press the knife down. Do not go back and forth, just go up and down. Even better still, cut the dough on a chopping board. Now, in order for your matzah to be kosher, one of the rules is that it should be made from start to finish in 18 minutes. So that includes the mixing, kneading, rolling, cutting, and baking. Now, the version that I'm going to show you today is not going to be kosher because it will take slightly longer. Resting the dough can produce a much better result. Saying that, it is very easy to make these in less than 18 minutes. And I will show you how at the end of this video. Well, let's get on with making our dough. In a bowl, combine the water, salt and olive oil. Give it a good mix. Make sure you dissolve the salt completely. It won't be very pleasant kneading a dough with gritty sea salt in it. And of course, if you're making the kosher version, use kosher salt. And once the salt is dissolved completely, add the flour. Then grab your dough scraper and mix it to the dough. Mix it in the bowl until there is no dry flour left. And if you're struggling with the scraper, continue on by hand. Now tip the dough out on the table and knead it using the regular kneading method for 2 minutes. I like to press it down and forwards with the heel on my right hand, and I use the fingers on my left hand to fold the piece of dough under the heel of my right hand. Then I turn it and repeat. And yes, 2 minutes is more than enough because it's a very small piece of dough. It has a very low hydration, so don't worry if it doesn't look smooth, it's normal. Right now this dough is quite tough. It'll be difficult to roll it out, so we're going to wrap it up in some plastic wrap and pop it in the fridge to chill down and relax. During the half an hour resting stage, the gluten will lose some of its tension. Whilst the dough is chilling, start preheating your oven. 250 degrees Celsius, fan off. And that is 482 degrees Fahrenheit. This is a very quick bake. Right, it's been half an hour, the dough is well rested. Now we can cut it in half and start rolling it out. We need to roll this extremely thin, so that's why I'm cutting the dough in half. Working with smaller pieces makes it much easier. Give the table and your dough a generous dusting of flour. Now grab your rolling pin and gradually start rolling it out. Take your time, keep turning the dough as you roll it, and make sure you make it nice and thin. You should almost be able to see the table through it. After rolling, we can start cutting. Now you could just go rustic and cut it into random pieces, and in that case, don't worry about trimming the edges off. But of course, since I'm making a video, I want them to look all nice and perfect. So I'm definitely going for the neat and straight look. Saying that, I will bake the trimmings too, there's nothing wrong with them. Half a dough ball makes 4 decently sized matzah. After cutting it up, grab your fork and poke a load of holes in the dough. The holes will prevent the matzah from puffing up. Okay, now move your crackers to a non-stick paper lined tray and then repeat the same steps using the other half of the dough. And while I'm doing that, I want to let you know that you can find other cracker recipes on my channel. You'll find them in the Flatbreads and Crackers playlist. I think my favorite are the cheesy ones. They contain more cheese than flour. There are of course healthier versions too, like the rye cracker recipe. But let's get back to our matzah. Cover them up and let them rest for 15 minutes. This resting step will stop the crackers from shrinking as they bake. But there's one thing we want to do before baking, which is brushing them with water and sprinkling them with salt. The water isn't just there to make the salt stick to the surface, it also makes the crust crispier. And it will get a better color too. And we'll test out the brush versus a spray bottle today. But let's get these bad boys in the oven. They will take around 3 to 4 minutes. As soon as the bubbles start browning, they are ready. Just make sure that the bottom side is dry. If not, flip them and bake them for another minute or so. Now we used the brush to brush the water on earlier, let's try the spray bottle, see how it works out. I prefer this from a practical perspective. You get a much more even coverage of water, and the spray bottle is a handy tool to have, especially when you're making bread at home. Right, top with salt and get these bad boys in the oven. Again, they'll take around 3 to 4 minutes, no longer than that. It's worth noting that I've placed the rack of my oven in the middle, which is slightly closer to the heating element than I would normally do. And there you have it, that's how I make matzah. And yes, using the brush or the spray bottle made no difference in the end. The results were exactly the same, so use what you have, use what you like. But it's definitely worth having a spray bottle at home. It's great for misting your loaf before it goes in the oven. Alright, let's check this out up close. Look how nice and crispy it is. It is so fun to snap these in half. If your crackers bend, then they have not been in the oven for long enough. This is how they should look. But this video is not over yet. As promised earlier, I'll make matzah in 18 minutes or less. Couple of ground rules, of course. The oven is preheated and the ingredients have been weighed out, because the time technically starts only when the flour hits the water. This time I'm only making half the recipe, so only one tray of matzah. I mixed it and kneaded it for 2 minutes. Now I'm going to cover it and let it rest for another 2 minutes. And for the same purpose as earlier in the fridge, we are resting because we want the dough to be easier to roll out. If you try and roll it out straight after mixing, it's not going to budge. It's going to keep pulling back together. And there is definitely time to rest, even if a little bit, because some resting time is way better than no resting time. Saying that, it was a struggle to roll out. It kept pulling back together all the time, but it also wasn't too bad. And we still have 9.5 minutes left, so we can easily place them on a tray and leave them to rest. It's the same reason as earlier, we rest them so they don't shrink too much as they bake. And look at that, we still have 8 minutes left, and the only thing left to do is baking. So let's spray them with water, sprinkle them with salt, and get them in the oven. I guess I could have easily made a double batch. Even after baking, we still got time to spare. So as you can see, it is totally possible to make these in 18 minutes or less. It's not even challenging, I wasn't even rushing. I honestly expected it to take me longer than that. We have almost 4 minutes left to spare. What I should have done is flip my matzah and place them back in the oven for another minute. Because this batch was not as crispy. I think I was rushing too much. They look alright, but they do not snap in half as well. If I left them to cool down for a bit longer, they would. But the best solution would just be to bake them for slightly longer, especially because there was so much time left. As always, I make the mistakes so you don't have to. So what do you think this recipe? Have you ever tried something like this before? Let me know down in the comments. You want to see more videos like this one? Click over here. Subscribe to the channel, click right here. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.